What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel.
It's time for our 2019 college football schedule preview for the Florida Gators. You can see the schedule there on your screen. A team that finished the season really strong last year, and I think they have a chance to be really good in 2019. Second year under Dan Mullen, especially second year with his offense, and Felipe Franks under his offense. I think that's why this team offensively has a chance to be maybe the best team in the SEC outside of Alabama on that side of the ball. I don't know if I would say that for sure, but they're going to be one of the top teams in my opinion. Defensively, they have plenty of talent. Florida always has the talent there, and they lost some guys that went to the draft early this season, but they have some guys that stayed that could have went to the NFL, so they didn't do that bad in that area. And I think talent-wise, this team can stack up with pretty much anyone in the SEC. Again, you look at the schedule, and it's tough. I mean, this is a brutal schedule depending on Miami and Florida State. If they are top 25 teams, this is one of the toughest schedules, I think, in the country. If they're both down like they were last year, then the schedule is really not that bad, but it's still a pretty tough schedule. So it's kind of tough to figure out exactly, where this schedule would rank when we don't know for sure how good those two teams are going to be. I think they're both going to be better, so I do think this is a really tough schedule. They play LSU and Auburn out of the West, so you've got two of the top teams out of the West, two really tough non-conference games, and that makes for a very difficult schedule. They open up with Miami and Orlando. Going to be a huge game week one. And they have UT Martin before playing on the road at Kentucky. Remember, Kentucky beat them last year. They'll be out for revenge. Tennessee is going to be a much improved team. Then you have Towson. Auburn next at LSU at South Carolina. Very tough back-to-back road games there. They get a bye week before playing Georgia. And of course, that's going to be the huge game in the SEC East. Vanderbilt after that, then on the road at Missouri, a team that they have struggled with in the last couple seasons for whatever reason. We'll see if that happens again. And then they get a bye week before playing Florida State. And it's interesting because I've already looked at Florida State's schedule, and both of these teams have bye weeks before they play. A lot of these SEC teams play an FCS opponent that next to the last week. Well, they just went ahead and used a bye week for Florida and Florida State. And that's something else with this schedule this year. All the teams are going to have two bye weeks because of the way there are 5 Saturdays in November. The way it works, yes, you will have 2 bye weeks. So Florida will have one of those before Florida State. So you look for the easy wins. I think UT Martin and Towson will be very easy wins for Florida. Pretty much guaranteed victories. Yes, the schedule's tough, but you'd like to avoid having 2 FCS opponents. I mean, come on. At least play a group of 5 team. Play UTEP. Play somebody, not 2 FCS schools. But that's how Florida has their schedule. Then you look for the next tier of games, the games that Florida should win. You feel pretty confident that they will win. Maybe there'll be games that are fairly close, but you'd be very, very surprised to see Florida lose. And I looked through the schedule, and it's tough to find those types of games. I mean, really. They could lose to Kentucky on the road. They could lose to Tennessee. That's a rivalry. They're going to be much better. Vanderbilt's really the only game that I felt comfortable putting in that slot. So that means 3 wins for Florida, and the rest of the games are going to be games that they could potentially lose. That means it could be a really good season, or it could be a really bad season with this schedule. Again, we don't know how good some of these teams are going to be, but yes, Miami, Florida State, those will be interesting. Kentucky and Missouri, South Carolina on the road. Those are games I think Florida will be the better team, but playing on the road, you never know. Auburn, I think Florida will be favored at home. LSU is going to be tough. Tennessee, I was close to putting them in that category with Vanderbilt, but because of the rivalry and because we've seen some really interesting games in the past, and I think Tennessee is going to be a lot better. So I left that one blank, and that really means that, it could be anything. They could finish 7-5, or they could finish 11-1, and that's exactly where I have their best and worst case scenarios. I think best case scenario, you get through this schedule 11-1. You'd like to beat Georgia so you can win the East. Let's say they lose to LSU on the road, win the rest of their games. To me, that's the best case scenario. I do not see Florida going through this schedule undefeated. It's just too tough of a schedule. Now on the flip side, the worst case scenario, we have 9 games here that we are looking at that could maybe go either way. I think if you win 4 of those. That's the worst case scenario. So if you go 4-5 in those 9 games, that would be the worst case scenario. And I think they're better than that. I do not expect them to go 7-5. I think you're really looking at between 9-3 and 11-1. Just my personal opinion on this team. But again, because of the schedule, I don't feel comfortable putting that. I think, I'm trying to cover this. I'm trying to say that I can pretty much guarantee Florida will win in this range. So if I say 9-11, it's possible that they go 8-4, and then I'm wrong. So that's why I'm trying to get this gap as narrow as possible. But with this type of schedule, I don't think you can really zone in on Florida's overall record for sure, because there are so many games that they could lose. So 7-11, somewhere in there for the win total. That's what I'm going to go with. Again, I personally, if I was going to pick, would say probably 9, 10, or 11, somewhere in there. But it is a tough schedule. I hate the crossover rule in the SEC. That Florida has to play LSU every year. Auburn has to play Georgia every year. Meanwhile, Ole Miss, who do they play? They play Vanderbilt. I mean, I hate that rule. I get the rivalries and all that, but it's just not right. I think they should come up with some way to balance the schedule. And Florida really comes up on the short end here. And what about Auburn? They have to play Florida and Georgia. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. So very difficult schedule here for Florida, assuming Miami and Florida State are good. Again, if they're not good, if they're down, this schedule is really not that bad. And I think 11-1 is very, very possible for this Florida team. If both of those teams are top 25 type teams, top 15 type teams, I think it may be tough for Florida to get to 11-1. I think 9 or 10 wins may be more likely. But that's just an early look at it. Again, we still have a lot of evaluating to do on all of these teams, and that's what we will be doing all off season.
Thank you for watching this video. If you're an SEC football fan, please subscribe to the channel. Leave us your thoughts down in the comments below. And for the latest in SEC football, keep it right here.